Good morning, everybody. My name is Wyatt King. I am the director of the Greater Cincinnati 2030 District, which, as many of you know, is the Buildings and Energy Program at Green Umbrella, which is the Tri-State Area's regional climate collaborative. And I am very pleased this morning to be presenting the latest in our recurring series of webinars on the ever-shifting landscape of funding opportunities for clean energy and energy efficiency projects. So if you have such a project in mind or are just interested in the topic, you are in the right place. And as I mentioned, this is a ever-shifting landscape. So I'm delighted to present Nikki Vandevoort, who is with the City of Cincinnati and tracks these issues very closely. She is, as ever, our stalwart presenter on these topics. And without further ado, I will simply hand the floor to Nikki.
Well, thank you. Hi, all. My name is Nikki Vandevoort. I work at the City of Cincinnati's Office of Environment and Sustainability. I'm on the energy team, and part of my role has been for the past 2 years to do public outreach and education around the incentives available for energy efficiency, clean energy, et cetera, for all sectors, residents, nonprofits, businesses, you name it, public institutions. So there will be a little bit of all of that in today's presentation. If you've attended previously, there is some new content because it seems that there is something new to report on a weekly basis practically. So I'll get started. Share my screen. All right. So this is my Clean Energy Funding Update webinar. Our agenda today will cover a few slides on energy prices being on the rise. I'm sure some of you have noticed that even just at home, let alone at any of your places of business or where you volunteer. What's happened with HR 1 and beyond? We are now in the thick of appropriations, so I'll be going over that a little bit. Just an update and a reminder around deadlines for the tax credits. There is some new information related to the EV tax credits, status of some grants and loans, strategies for near-term clean energy spending, and some resources. And also, while I'm at this point in the presentation, if you can think while I am presenting of any resources that you think would be useful beyond, I am always looking for funding opportunities, but maybe you're in a category that I'm not, I haven't seemed to have addressed. Please do speak up, put it in the chat. I'd like to be able to provide more resources for folks. All right, and as a disclaimer, this is a presentation that includes an overview of tax provisions and loan provisions, but I am neither an attorney nor an accountant. This is all stuff that's readily available online. I just am curating it for you and happy to discuss things, but not in any sort of legal or tax capacity. All right, so energy prices on the rise. We know that a lot of us have been experiencing a pretty big spike in your electricity bills. And I just wanted to call that out because it has a significant impact on a lot of folks, especially our low and moderate income folks. And to try and kind of draw your attention to why is it increasing so much. So a big part of this is that PJM, which is our regional transmission organization, it serves PJM actually stands for Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Maryland, but it covers a transmission network inclusive of Ohio, parts of Indiana, and other sort of Midwest and Northeast states. And they are the ones that kind of organize the transmission grid, and the price of energy is dependent on decisions that they make. And a portion of your electricity bill goes towards what's called capacity. And capacity costs make up about 20% of the typical consumer's bill. And last year, when they did an auction for this year, you noticed your bills went up in June, July. They did the auction for the energy right now a year ago. And that price, that portion of your bill, the capacity portion, jumped like 800%, because they are anticipating with capacity how much energy they're going to need on the grid in the future. And it goes towards like payments to make sure that those sources of energy are on the grid when they're needed on our most intense energy days. And so that's really jumped. Think of it not as like the energy, paying for the energy of itself, but almost like an insurance policy. This is a picture of the PJM area. Why are capacity prices going up? I think it's been in the news a lot, but a growing electricity demand really tied to data centers, particularly in Ohio. But also electrification and EVs and things like that, and more high heat. People are having to run their ACs, for longer throughout the year. There's also been an interconnection backlog for new generation, which means that the Public Utilities Commission of Ohio and like PJM as a whole, they have a long list of interested energy generation that is just waiting to get through the approvals and review stage with those organizations. There have been some power plant retirements across the grid, and then there have been some new rules around reliability. So Duke's electric generation price increased 30% this past June. PJM has also already conducted their auction for the following year. That's why on the previous slide you were able to see into the future. And they had set a cap. It was something that like the governor of Pennsylvania had said, like, we can't keep accommodating these outrageous like increases. And so they installed a cap. And of course, the auction came in right at the cap. So PJM expects increases of up to an additional 5% in people's bills next year as well. So that's the reality we're living right now with the cost of energy. What has happened with the overall federal budget bill and spending? So if you've been in this presentation before, I kind of covered what happened. I don't refer to it as the big, beautiful bill. I refer to it as HR 1. That kind of kicked off earlier this year. The House passed their version of HR 1 back in late May, and then that kicked over to the Senate. Their various committees looked at it in June, and their Finance Committee released language mid-June, which started, I think, really sounding some alarm bells around the potential cuts to all sorts of social services, but also the Inflation Reduction Act was a pretty major target. It went through a 27-hour vote-a-rama. That is actually a term that you can like follow through on my links below and find like a government description of what vote-a-rama means. And eventually leading to the Senate passing the bill. The House took up their version and passed the bill so that the president could sign it by 4th of July. However, new to this slide, if you've seen it before, this doesn't just end with the budget bill itself. Now we are in the appropriations bill season. The fiscal year for the federal government begins October 1st. And so there's a deadline here to pull together how is the government going to spend money and how they're going to direct money to which programs by the end of this month. And so there's it's playing out behind closed doors and out in the public of, are Democrats going to say no and not put any effort towards these bills, or even the committees that are voting on parts of these bills, until they get maybe some things clawed back or fixed so that the financial implications are not so stark for their constituents and interested parties. So not only is appropriations happening, but also executive orders are still coming forward and affect how funding is going to be prioritized or frozen. So there was an executive order right after the signing of HR 1 on July 7th that was related specifically to like prohibited foreign entities and concerns around particularly really targeting like solar projects and wind projects that could potentially benefit from utilizing materials sourced from China, even though they do mention other prohibited foreign entities like Russia and North Korea and Iran. It's really an anti-China sort of effort. Also, like the secretaries of the various departments can throw up their own orders and obstacles, and a lot of those lifetime employees have left and are now, being replaced by like political appointees, and so that's throwing up obstacles as well. Lots of headwinds right now. So just kind of an update on where we're at with federal appropriations. There are committees that are kind of focused on different areas. And so like there's an energy and water appropriations bill that covers certain things. There are other, like there's a defense group and many other committees that are kind of pulling together their programs and whatnot and identifying which how and which programs will get funded on both the Senate side and on the House side. And so a few programs that I've been tracking that are of interest, and the resources are below on this slide. You can go check it out yourself. There are other programs that are identified in the resources that I found, but the low-income home energy assistance program, or LIHEAP, looks like they are cutting some funding, but not tremendously. It's passed both Senate and House committees, but there's been no full vote yet. The Housing Weatherization Assistance Program, which locally is administered by an organization called People Working Cooperatively, in 2025, fiscal year 2025, it had a $336 million budget. The House markup of this is halving that, and we don't have a Senate markup yet, so that's pretty serious. On the Energy Star side of things, it looks like not a tremendous cut, if any cut, even though there had been discussions of like doing away with Energy Star. So that's pretty interesting. And then the Community Development Block Grant, which locally we see, that goes towards a lot of things. And I know here at the city, we have some home repair programs that are funded by this HUD program that was funded in fiscal year 2025 at $3.3 billion. And the House has passed in committee a commitment to that same level. The Senate is slightly less. So passed the committees, but no full vote yet. Looking at the House Energy and Water Appropriations Bill, that was pushed through with like a single vote majority with no Democratic votes this past September the 4th. It represented like a 1.3% reduction in current funding levels, but within that total top line budget, the focuses were shifted on defense spending and advanced nuclear, but axing programs like the Department of Energy's Office of Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy, which is pretty serious. So I'm going to move more into the IRA and what we have to work with the IRA left. And just as a refresher, the IRA represented not only tax credits, but also loans and grant programs. But tax credits were a bulk of what the IRA was about. Just over half of the funding was going towards business and tax-exempt organization tax credits. And yes, through the direct pay provision, nonprofits were able to take advantage of a tax credit, even though you don't pay taxes. So again, geared towards consumers, businesses, and tax exempt entities. In the next slides, we will cover the particular tax credits. And I just color code things. So when you see something that's kind of color coded green, that's really geared towards individuals. If it's color coded purple, it's really geared towards businesses and tax exempt entities. So for our individuals, our consumers, there are three key tax credits that were originally in the Inflation Reduction Act intended to go through 2032 and now have significantly accelerated deadlines for termination. So for EVs, and I have some new information around EVs in the next slide. But if you were looking at personally to purchase a new clean EV or a used clean vehicle, that must be done and acquired prior to the end of this month. So make the decision, get out there and go buy your EV if that's something you were wanting to do. It's a 30% tax credit that you realize upfront at the point of sale. That's not true for these other tax credits, but it is for the EV tax credit. Then there for homes, there's the 25C energy efficient home improvement credit. That is geared towards really like what can you do to your building envelope, like weatherization and insulation, or your appliances like replacing furnaces with a heat pump, or your regular gas hot water heater with a heat pump hot water heater. That new timeline is that those items must be placed in service prior to the end of this year. And then the same deadline is true for the 25D residential clean energy credit, which is things like residential solar. I need to fix this slide. This is not true for geothermal heat pumps. Geothermal heat pumps or ground source heat pumps will still have a tax credit, or sorry, getting myself confused. Geothermal heat pumps for individuals, for consumers, this is ending. But there is a way forward with businesses and like almost like a lease situation for ground source heat pumps that could move forward through like 2032. So I'll speak to that more on another slide. But the new information around this is that it must be constructed prior to the end of the year. And so there was a frequently asked questions document. I have it linked at the bottom of the slide that was released in August related to some of these changes to the tax credits. And one of the questions was, well, when you say acquired, does that mean like I can schedule, I can put my money down on having these improvements or having solar coming out to be installed, but not actually having it constructed before the end of the year? And they did come back definitively saying it must be constructed prior to the end of this year. More on the tax credits for EVs. This is a picture of my EV. It's a Hyundai Ioniq 5, but all other EVs are great too, but I do enjoy my car. So as part of those frequently asked questions, there was a question related to EVs and what does it mean to be acquired for an EV? And so they said that you need to have a written binding contract entered into and a payment has been made. And that can also include like a vehicle trade-in. So this is great because previously acquired had meant like you have to take possession. It has to be delivered, or like in the case of commercial EVs, has to be delivered and put in use. And it's a little easier for individuals to be able to go in, make your vehicle trade-in or your down payment and drive off the lot with your car. But so this is important for really anybody who was looking at updating like their fleet or getting an electric van or whatever for their company or their nonprofit. So this is applicable, this definition of acquired is applicable to not only the individual EV tax credits, but the commercial tax credit for EVs as well. And again, alarm bells, September 30th is the deadline for acquiring these vehicles. I just want to touch on direct pay like I always do because nonprofits, it's still tricky for folks to wrap their brains around, but there is a provision in the Inflation Reduction Act, which was not changed during the budget bill this past summer, um, called direct pay or elective pay. And so before the IRA, on the left-hand side of this slide, a tax-exempt entity would have to go through like a financing agreement with their installer, like their solar installer or a designer. And that private company would then claim the federal tax credit, and the nonprofit would get a discount, like a pass-through on their energy project. Um, uh, and typically that was not the full value of the tax credit. Whereas now, after direct pay, after the Inflation Reduction Act, that entity, the nonprofit, can directly apply for the tax credit and realize the full value. So a lot of these tax credits are 30%, and 30% is a lot better than like 20%. So it's been a positive development. And it's still something that nonprofits, and by nonprofit, I mean, you know, your typical human services nonprofits, but um, uh, local government entities and public institutions like public schools and houses of worship all could take advantage of this provision, the direct pay provision. Moving on to here's my purple slide. This is tax exempt and business entities, as well as one that is applicable to all, including consumers. The budget bill accelerates the end dates for several other things related to these entities. So the 179D commercial buildings energy efficiency tax deduction, note that's a deduction, not a credit. So it doesn't apply to like direct pay and whatnot. Still uses that kind of older format of, if you want to take advantage of it as a nonprofit, you have to go through a financing agreement with a private company that is helping you, either a designer or whatnot. But commercial building energy efficiency improvements, at least making those buildings at least 25% better in energy use beyond the industry standard. There's a whole kind of I have a slide on it later on increasing the value of the tax deduction depending on the improvement percentage. So it's a minimum of 25%, but it has to, you can go higher than that and get more money in your deduction. The new eligibility timeline is that you must begin construction if you're pursuing this prior to the June 30th, 2026. So a little bit more time and wiggle room to make decisions around those types of commercial building improvements. Then I did mention the commercial clean vehicle credit. So for EVs that want to, if commercial owners want to purchase an EV and take advantage of the 30% tax credit, again, when I need to update this, it needs to be acquired prior to the end of this month. So, and that new definition of acquired is on that previous slide. And then there's a 30C alternative fuel vehicle refueling credit. It's a mouthful, essentially EV chargers. In caveat, low income and rural areas, there's a map for that. And it's applicable for not only consumers, but businesses and tax exempt entities that must be placed in service prior to June 30th, 2026. So not that you necessarily always need an EV charger, like a level 2 installed if you're a consumer, or even at providing this at work. But if you were to go ahead and make some sort of upgrade related to being able to charge your EV, then it could be eligible for this credit. This is my particular slide on 179D, kind of outlining the gist of that tax deduction. It's for things like building envelope, interior lighting, HVAC, hot water, not clean energy. And so qualified on buildings that are at least 5 years old that are pursuing retrofits, or new commercial buildings. And then here's my dedicated slide for the commercial clean vehicles tax credit. It is a 30% tax credit. The max benefit is $7,500 for your typical like fleet vehicle. And you know, sedans or SUVs. If you've got a bigger truck, like a school bus or a dump truck, the max benefit is $40,000. And as of last month, I, just did kind of a Google search on some of our local car dealerships that they are advertising the upfront tax credit for purchases and lease cash. So if you wanted to even just go through a lease, they have a way of taking advantage of the tax credit if they lease the vehicle to you. So again, an option. And then here's the dedicated slide for the EV chargers tax credit. So it's for individuals, it's a maximum $1,000 benefit or a 30% credit. For commercial, it's a 6% tax credit. And you can, at the baseline, if you use prevailing wage and apprenticeship and meet those requirements, you can get the 30% with a max 100,000 per unit benefit. And again, caveat here, you must be in the MAP area for low income communities or rural areas to qualify for this particular tax credit. So this is where I say that solar is worth it in Cincinnati. We do get sunshine. We have a beautiful sunny day today. Even in the winter, we have fairly mild winters and low snowfall. And so as long as your building isn't too shaded or your roof needs to be replaced, then solar could be right for you. There are some resources here, including Energy Sage's solar calculator. They have like a page, if you Google Energy Sage nonprofits, they have like a dedicated landing page for nonprofits. But they have not only a solar calculator, but like a vetted solar installer like marketplace, and you don't have like they don't give your contact info out, so you won't receive a bunch of emails and phone calls immediately after signing up. But you provide your address, and then they can, if you're interested, put it out to their solar installers, and then those folks turn quotes around, and because it's competitive, and also because it's a dedicated resource for those installers to have, folks that are going through this route are a better bet than just the average person giving them a phone call. Those quotes are typically coming in cheaper than if you were to just go for it on your own. Also, Solar United Neighbors has a ton of resources on their website, including a free solar help hotline that you can call. You just call up, and if you have questions about solar, or you have a quote that you're like, is this legitimate? Is this company legitimate? That they're a great resource as well. But talking more about solar, particularly for tax exempt entities and um, uh, for-profit businesses, that we're thinking about the investment tax credit, the ITC. It has a sister credit called the production tax credit. It's really not going to be relevant for most folks unless you're doing like a whole solar field or something like that. So we focus on the ITC. The budget bill made some pretty big changes to this tax credit. They kind of bifurcated the tax credit, which is meant to be clean energy neutral. But they bifurcated it out so that there is an early phase out for wind and solar, whereas the other types of clean energy like nuclear, geothermal, hydropower, even battery storage are pretty much left alone, and those tax credits are at this point still in effect through 2032, 33, and as there is a phase down. But for wind and solar, which I think most folks would be considering, there is an accelerated timeline here, and different things happen along the way. So briefly, on the left side in the red box, ideally, if you're considering doing solar, you would, as a tax exempt entity or a business, you would begin construction prior to the end of this year, because you will be able to realize the full credit, which is a 30% tax credit, and there's no cap. but you would avoid the material assistance restrictions that the new budget bill imposed. There's still some prohibited foreign entity, that's what PFE stands for, requirements at the entity level and payment restrictions so that you haven't been making payments to a Chinese company and you are not influenced by a prohibited foreign entity. There's definitions for this sort of stuff on another slide, but the fewest restrictions will be put up on your project if you can begin construction before the end of this year. If you begin construction between January 1st of next year and 4th of July of next year, still going to get the full credit, but now you will have to comply with the full suite of prohibited foreign entity requirements. I should note, if you can construct before 4th of July of 2026, whether it's before the end of this year or before, it's in 2026, but before 4th of July, you still will be able to have up to 4 years to complete your project, so long as you can demonstrate that you've been making consistent, you've been doing consistent construction. And so that gives you a lot more like breathing room, and there's no immediate sort of deadline to get your project constructed. So at least if you can begin construction before 4th of July 2026, then you have a benefit there in terms of your timeline. If you if you begin construction after 4th of July 2026, you do still get the full credit, but now not only do you have to comply with the full PFE suite, but you must place your project in service before the end of 2027. So for the typical rooftop, that's going to be totally doable, honestly. But if you have like a lot of hoops you have to jump through, if you have a board of commissioners or some sort of corporate board that has to make approvals, maybe that takes some time. And so something to think about if you wanted some of that longer runway is getting it done, getting construction started before 4th of July of next year. Beyond the end of 2027, in 2028 and beyond, the credits are currently eliminated. So again, this was supposed to be good through 2032 with a phase down thereafter. And unfortunately, this part for wind and solar has an early phase out now, thanks to the budget bill that passed. But if you're looking at other technology, and I think it's kind of a special thing for energy storage for batteries, if you were able to pull off like doing like a rooftop solar project now, and then later down the line, we're able to, fundraise to do a battery, that would make it easier for you to fully address your electricity needs, and also uh, you know have that level of resilience. Also with the ITC, they had some bonus credits for additional 10 and 20%, and those were not affected for projects. So I think on the next page we talk about bonus credits. There's a visualization here. So the ITC base credit is this hot pink 30%. And for all of our, most of our projects, they're all going to be under that 1 megawatt threshold. 1 megawatt represents like a 4 to 5 acre solar array. So most folks who are doing rooftop, not even worried about hitting that threshold. So be under 1 megawatt, you automatically qualify for the 30% base credit, assuming you meet the requirements. Then there's these stacking credits. So 10% if you're located on the map for energy communities or you're on a brownfield. And that's one of those things where if you meet the requirements, you get the 10%. It's not competitive. Then there's another 10% for domestic content. So if you are it's 100% American steel and iron, and you meet the requirement for that year related to manufactured components, the percentage being made domestically, then you get that additional 10% domestic content bonus. Then there is a competitive tax, a bonus credit called the Low Income Communities tax credit, and it's a 10 or a 20% bonus. It is competitive. Projects must be less than 5 megawatts. Again, you know, if 1 megawatt is 4 to 5 acres, most folks are not worried about this threshold. But the 10% bonus is related to projects that are located in a mapped area for low-income communities, and I have a link for the map. Or the 20% is if it's located on affordable multifamily housing or is otherwise considered a low-income economic benefits project. So if you're a nonprofit that is interested in putting solar on the roof of, you know, you serve homes, maybe it's like CMHA or other like OTRCH, other organizations that have housing for residents, then low-income residents, then you would be eligible for that 20% stacking credit. It's competitive. There are like 4 different categories. So if you're just located in the low-income communities versus if you're doing the economic benefit project, and there is more preference given to tax exempt entities because this tax credit is also eligible for businesses. But traditionally they've given preference to nonprofit entities and tax exempt entities for this credit. So here's just kind of a rundown of the positives. After the budget bill, we still have elective pay, our ground source heat pumps. So this is kind of the, I'll talk about it a little bit later. These were not affected. The original ITC, there's a provision in there specific to ground source heat pumps that can still be claimed through the end of 2034. Leased residential solar installations are still eligible. So in that instance where like, if you're a nonprofit that owns homes for low income folks, that you can, you know, own the property, the solar property on those homes, and then the residents realize the benefits of the lowered electricity bill. That sort of loop, the avoiding having to go through the residential tax credit, is still viable. And then energy storage batteries are eligible still for the ITC. Nothing in the bill mentions anything from the bipartisan infrastructure law or BIL, aka the IIJA, because let's throw in some more acronyms. But that's exciting because the BIL is kind of a sister law to the Inflation Reduction Act. It isn't fully a climate-related act or law rather, but did have a lot of climate-related provisions or energy-related provisions. And then the Department of Energy's Home Energy Rebates Program was not mentioned during the budget bill. And so to date, those programs, some of them have launched in various states. I want to say 13 states have launched or are about to launch. Like Indiana has already launched. Ohio, it was conditionally approved, so we don't know yet when they will launch, but that's exciting because those rebates will represent some savings related to energy efficiency improvements and replacing gas appliances with electrified appliances. And depending on your area median income, if you're below 80%, that equals like a full rebate in many instances. So could help a lot of lower income folks. Negative, I pointed a lot of negatives out, but yeah, we have that accelerated phase out of the ITC and the PTC, the accelerated phase out of the consumer facing credits, these new prohibited foreign entities restrictions, the termination of the Section 170D deduction, which has been around well before the Inflation Reduction Act. And unobligated funding was rescinded for nearly every major EPA IRA program. So anything that had not been dedicated in a grant or a loan program already was clawed back during with the passage of the budget bill. And then the rescinding of unobligated funding for the Green and Resilient Retrofit Program. This is a multifamily housing project or program representing approximately $138 million that had still not been paid out, but everything had already been awarded or like designated. So I know that we had a number of local projects that had qualified for these retrofit dollars that would have helped multi-family housing projects. So that is super unfortunate. So putting a lot of that bad news behind us and looking ahead, how do we pivot and meet this moment? Strategies. If you are eligible, if you have eligible project for a direct pay, elective pay, go for it. The IRS still has regular office hours. They still have their guidance materials posted online. You can find frequently asked questions. Um, there are organizations out there that have been trying to make it as simple and straightforward and clear as possible. So there's like annotated tax forms and blueprints for different types of credits from both the like Electrification Coalition. They're really focused on EVs, but also Lawyers for Good Government has a ton of great resources, and they've also thrown their weight now into some of the litigation to try and secure some of the grants and loan programs that have been at risk. If you are in the position to start a project, make those expenditures, begin construction, place that property into service by those accelerated deadlines. And so here's a list again of all those deadlines in one place. Other strategies, things are not completely taken away. And I mentioned geothermal heat pumps, ground source heat pumps. Those are still eligible for the 30% tax credit for commercial entities, the original ITC. And so long as you begin construction before January 1st, 2033, and there's a 2-year phase down after that. You would also be eligible for those bonus credits I mentioned. So the domestic content, energy communities, low income communities. So you could potentially stack beyond that 30% base tax credit. And because this is the original ITC and they didn't loop it in for the prohibited foreign entity requirements, there are no prohibited foreign entity restrictions for this type of clean energy. So I have a copy and paste screenshot from a presentation that the Department of Energy did specifically related to schools. But on the left is an example from Massachusetts. On the right is an example from Wisconsin, which is more applicable for Ohioans because we do not, if you can compare the two graphs, we don't have utility incentives here in Ohio. But the examples were given of, a new school has the choice of putting in a traditional gas boiler. It would cost $4.6 million, or putting in a ground source heat pump, which upfront would cost $6.2 million, but with the investment tax credit bringing it down 30%, it would ultimately cost $4.1 million, and it is far more energy efficient and cost effective down the line. So definitely a strategy for folks to consider for new construction and if you're looking to do a retrofit. This is just another screenshot from that great presentation that the Department of Energy presented on the life cycle cost of using a ground source heat pump versus, the code minimum and using a ground source heat pump with the tax credit benefit is that lower line. So the overall operating costs end up being far lower than your traditional, gas boiler. This is a slide that's, not dedicated to clean energy, but is relevant for a lot of like developers or tax exempt entities that do take advantage, or sorry, not tax exempt entities, but developers. We'll just leave it there. So opportunity zones, the budget bill made those permanent. That's something that's been around for a few years. It came out under Trump 1.0, I think. And then the low income housing tax credit was made permanent under the budget bill, and credit ceiling was increased. So that's good. And then the new markets tax credits were also permanently extended, which helps with encouraging investment in businesses and real estate projects in low income communities. So the these are some silver linings from that budget bill. I'm not going to dive deep into what prohibited foreign entities and material assistance rules are, but I wanted to provide a slide so that you have, a single place to go to for the high level information around this. So if you need it, there it is. But please do reach out if you have questions. I'd be happy to speak to it a little more in detail or just talk it through with you. Another thing to be wary of and very cognizant of is like, what does begin construction mean? So traditionally, it has meant these two different tests that you had to satisfy, one or the other. It was the physical work test or the 5% safe harbor test. So on this slide, we have the physical work test. It must be significant work, which means it can't be on this table, the right-hand column. It can't be beginning construction doesn't mean that you've applied for permitting or you've started grading a site or anything like that. It has to be like if we're talking about solar projects, the installation of racks or support or pouring a concrete pad for if you're doing a large scale solar project like the oh, I can't think of the word, but doing some significant on-site work or significant off-site work where you've like your solar installer has made a purchase for a not inverter, but like a transformer that has to be custom made. Anything that's custom made components made off-site, so long as you've signed a binding written contract, that counts as the beginning of construction. And then the other test, we've got some new guidance around this. Links below. So the 5% safe harbor, this test used to apply to all solar sizes. It is now only applicable, all solar sizes and wind. It is now only applicable to solar facilities under 1.5 megawatts, which is going to cover anybody's rooftop project. So essentially, 5% safe harbor means that if you've spent 5% of the total project cost by the deadline, which, I covered those deadlines. We've got end of the year to begin construction. We've got 4th of July next year to begin construction. So those two major deadlines for beginning construction. If you've spent the 5% of your total project, then you can count that as the beginning of your construction. A lot of times you might have like an unexpected cost. You would have like maybe a cost overrun. So best practices is to aim for higher than 5%, maybe 10%. Some folks say 12% of expenditure. And that can be things like you put down a down payment, you've made a purchase for like a purchase order for like that transformer or whatever, things like that. So very important to pay attention to, work with your installer on that. And also, once you've begun construction, you needed to be able to demonstrate continuous construction. Although, if you've had a delay in construction due to like severe weather or natural disasters or permitting or interconnection, there's a whole list of things that like, if that happens and it delays your construction, it doesn't mean that you lose your tax credit. So status of the IRA grants and loans. These are some of the ones that I keep track of every time I do this presentation. So we are still in a situation with the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, the $27 billion program, where the funds for essentially the green banks, those are still largely frozen at Citibank. That litigation is kind of, ongoing situation. And then the EPA sent a termination letter to all recipients of the Solar for All grant on August 7th that the Solar for All grant is terminated. There was language in the budget bill that kind of terminated this entire GGRF program, which has these three categories of the Green Bank programs, NCIF and CCIA, and Solar for All. And there were a lot of folks who thought, you know, there had been a lot of talk with Congress people about the importance of the Solar for All program. There was a lot of hope that it would be carved out by anything in the budget bill. It was not. And so, but all of these funds had been legally obligated. They have grant agreements signed and whatnot. So there is, you know, a process for the grantees to go through to dispute the termination. So some of the grantees are going through that. I'm sure some of them are also pursuing litigation. But it's just unfortunate. Locally, the city of Cincinnati, we got a $10 million, or we were expecting approximately $10 million through the Industrial Heartland Solar Coalition that received a Solar for All grant. And then the state of Ohio had also received $156 million for Solar for All to do residential solar and multifamily. So it's really challenging for folks. On the home energy rebates program, I mentioned that Indiana launched their program back in May, so that's great. I know that we have some local contractors that are registered also with the Indiana program to provide some of those, you know, home energy improvements. And so hopefully when the Ohio program launches, we'll have some local experts who have already kind of been doing it in Indiana. And then also just the environmental justice TICTAC programs. I know that some local organizations had received this funding. There's a number of grants that kind of fell under this umbrella, and EPA terminated those grants, but there's also ongoing litigation there. So the fight goes on to try and claw back money that was clawed back. Quickly, I see I have 7 minutes left. New content, if you've been watching me over the past several months on these presentations, the Ohio Department of Development's Advanced Energy Fund has launched its next round. This is a fund that has had 2 rounds per year. This is the second round this year. The application period ends October 31st. It's for nonprofits and for-profit entities. There's $8.5 million available grants for between $250K and $2 million for projects where you're doing energy efficiency upgrades and clean energy generation, but it can't be just clean energy. You have to have energy efficiency improvements as well. And one of the big hurdles for folks that are applying to this is that you also have to have a level 2 ASHRAE energy audit. This can take around 3 weeks from scheduling it to completion, but you have to have that in hand before you can make your application to this fund. And you also have to demonstrate like a 15-year simple payback for the work that you're proposing to do. I also sent in some questions to ODOD that I know some of our partners had. So I have the Q&A here, but they don't have like a frequently asked questions section on their website. So you've got it here. Whether or not the grant covers soft costs like engineering and whatnot, or permitting, and whether or not entities that receive low-income housing tax credits are eligible, and then also if there's a required install deadline. Uh, I won't go through all the specifics, but in a lot of cases, it's like in a case-by-case basis, we'll review everybody's application. So not a lot of like hard and fast rules, but possibly things that you could do to make your application look more more attractive. I'm going to skip through. These are the federal thresholds and parameters for the home rebate program that has not launched yet in Ohio. But we don't know what Ohio's program will look like exactly. These are the thresholds and parameters that the feds put around this program, but each state received an allocation for this program, and each state had to put together their own program. So Indiana's might look slightly different than Ohio's, might look very different from Georgia's. And I'm going to skip through these. I've mentioned that there's some resources. Specifically, I have resources here for nonprofit entities. If you're interested in going solar, Collective Sun and Revolve are two organizations that do solar installations with nonprofits and houses of worship. And then I'd also mentioned Energy Sage earlier. And there's the Power Up Purchasing Cooperative that I think has been doing some work around like coordinating group purchases for energy. So something to look into. And also my office has pulled together some energy education resources. If you click the link here, it'll take you to, there's more than just these four. It could be useful if you work with clients on lowering their home costs. And with that, phew, we have 3 minutes to spare for any questions, and I'm going to stop sharing and see if there's anything that you guys want to ask me, or if there's other resources that I can help gather and put out for you.
Thank you very much, Nikki. A lot of actually great new information since our last installment. So thank you for continuing to keep on top of these developments. If folks have questions, as Nikki said, please feel free to, you can either enter them in the chat if you prefer to write them down, or just, as I think we're a small enough group, you can go ahead and just chime in.
Well, will you be sharing these slides with everybody that signed up?
Yes.
Absolutely. We will post those on the 2030 district website within the next couple of days. It usually takes us, our comms team, until probably early next week to get that online. But I will send a note to everybody who was registered for the webinar when it's up.
I dropped my email in the chat if something strikes you later and you want to reach out individually, happy to talk.
Hello.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
Yes. So basically, I was just listening to. First of all, my phone was acting stupid, so I couldn't. I came on a little late, but I was just listening to everything you guys were saying, and my main thing is like our community. We have, you know what I mean, not a lot of green spaces. You know what I'm saying? It's a lot of heat, and I learned that climate controls behavior. You know what I'm saying? The behavior patterns. So I would say, what steps that I know I heard all the information and everything. What steps can we take to like we start initiating like is there any dates in mind, any things in mind like green space stations, or you know, cooling stations for people that's in the bus stop, because it gets really hot here in the summer and really cold in the winter. We don't have that much snow, but it gets really cold in the winter sometimes.
Mark, are you part of one of the climate advisory groups?
Yes, in the West End.
Welcome.
Yes. I'm here on behalf of not only just myself, but on behalf of Sydney, Miss Sheila, and all the other people. I can't think of the one guy, the brother name from West Africa, but him too. Like, and the lady, the other
Awesome.
lady, I can't think of her
Bamadele.
name right now. But I'm definitely here on behalf of them, and I just. I don't know. It's just very interesting to me, you know, because you know I like to study different type of stuff. Like I was always a straight A student, so you know biology. I'm real proficient in like science, biology, and definitely math. I figure out problems in my head that people use calculators and AI for. So I'm real proficient in that.
Yeah.
So
Well, I'm glad that
I
they
really
had you on
want
the
to
team.
utilize my stature and like not only just my community, but all communities that may need this type of stuff. Like I basically
Well, you're getting a little bit,
Yeah.
I can't hear you very well.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Mark, you're breaking up. I don't know if your reception just got bad.
like I also do
There we go.
photography, videography, video editing, voiceovers, you know, graphic design,
Hey, Mark, I'm going to
websites
stop
designs,
you.
all that type of stuff. And if I can't do, I can always outsource somebody else that can do it. So I
Yeah.
just built up my network skills and resources to the point where I could be valuable asset to anything I'm a part of, and I want to be a part of something that's going to be progressive in society.
Well, I appreciate your participation in the climate advisory group. For folks on
Hold on,
the
excuse me, I
call.
can't hear you for some reason.
Oh, okay.
I can't hear you for some reason. Hold on. Yes.
Can you hear me now?
To the value there, but I can hear you though.
Okay, so I just want to say thank you for participating in the climate advisory group. For folks on the phone who've not are not familiar with that group, that's through the Climate Safe Neighborhoods program that Groundwork and Green Umbrella and the city have collaborated on. And there was just one done in the West End and Winton Hills. We've had them done in Avondale and Bond Hill and many other spots throughout the city and in Northern Kentucky. They work in neighborhoods to identify, to do some climate education, to identify some climate impact areas, and then to also create a climate adaptations map for their neighborhood. The next step, once you've created a map, is to actually implement. And so, Mark, I think you're asking about what sort of resources are there for implementation. And I would say at the city level, there is the Seeds of Change program. So looking for opportunities for grants. That's a grant that our office operates for grassroots efforts to do things at the local level, like up to $20,000 for things like community gardens, tree planting. If you want to do like some sort of energy efficiency kit and distribute that in like apartments or with your senior housing in your neighborhood, like things like that. So we will be looking to do, we've done a couple of rounds of Seeds of Change. We're going to be having the next big round in spring of next year. And that sort of information gets blasted out via, our office's newsletter. I'm sure Green Umbrella will pick it up. But that's just one idea off the top of my head, Seeds of Change.
Okay, and it's called Seeds of it's called Seeds of Change, SEEDS of Change
Yep.
program, and I can contact people in City Hall. I got contacts in City Hall.
Yep. If you want, I put my email address in the chat. You can reach out to me and I can email you some more resources about it.
Okay, yeah, cool. Because I could put that on my itinerary. Maybe not this week because I travel to Philly for. I also work for a media company called Easily Blessed Media. So we do a lot of stuff. We do like the glam box for the Cleveland Browns game right now. We got a contract for that. But anyway, I just when I come back, or I can start making calls or whatever, like to set up a meeting or whatnot. So I be in contact with you just to keep tabs on how everything is going along in the process, but that's something that I think it'd be really helpful. And what I notice is me and Miss Sheila, we make a great negotiation team or presentation team. Like, so I want to come with like a group or team of people. You know what I mean? If anything, it just looked better on the optics. It's like, okay, now I can see the organization as opposed to somebody just talking about it.
Yeah. Cool. Well, I'm so glad you joined. I
Well,
think we're 5 minutes past due, and I have another
Yes,
meeting
we
to
are.
join.
Yes, seeing a bit of a chat thread here about a possible source at EPA about clean energy funding opportunities. You think you may have a thought on that, Nikki?
Other clean energy funding opportunities?
No, the EPA source.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. Yeah, I can't remember. I feel like his name's Jesse or something, but I think I know what guy they're talking about.
Okay.
Yeah, it's Jesse. I can't remember how I got on his mailing list, but I'm pretty sure that he gets a lot of his information from the Environmental Protection Network. I think they have like some sort of like a funding clearinghouse section.
Yeah, EPN and L4GG,
Yeah,
two
they're great.
really good partners right now. All right.
Okay.
I have to jump, folks, because I'm going to go
Great.
talk about a solar project with some other folks. But
Nikki, thank you as always for your incredible efforts and keeping on top of all this information. Just for folks' information, we do try and do an update on this information quarterly. So if you'd like to keep abreast of the latest information, please keep a lookout for the next installment, which I believe is scheduled currently for December 11th, or that week at any rate.
Sounds right.
Okay,
All right. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
thank you.